Hello and welcome to this short video which is aimed at helping you with trust registration service. I'm Nikki Patel and I'm going to talk you through how you register a trust using HMRC's online portal. I'll start off by explaining some of the background to the Trust Registration Service, or TRS for short, and then I'll cover some hints and tips before walking you through the online registration itself. So let's start with the background to the TRS. European-wide anti-money laundering requirements have been brought in across the EU. And despite Brexit, we still need to comply with these regulations. HMRC have therefore introduced the Trust Registration Service, or TRS requirements. These requirements mean that any relevant trust must be registered on the TRS and kept up to date. For clients of advisors, this generally means any trust that is an express trust. If you have a trust that holds a protection plan, this only needs to be registered when the protection plan is either surrendered or a claim is made and that money is then held within the trust. If the protection plan is still in force, then it does not need to register. Any trusts caught by the TRS must be registered by 1st of September 2022 or within 90 days if later. Once registered on the TRS, if there are any changes made to things like beneficiary details, settler details, or trustee details, such changes need to be updated within 90 days of that change. It is worth covering off here who is responsible for completing the TRS. The regulations are clear that the trustees all have a joint responsibility to complete the TRS. In practical terms, the trustees should agree on which of them is to be the lead trustee, and it's the lead trustee who then completes the TRS. The lead trustee can be changed later on if wished. Failure to register the trust or keep it up to date may result in the trustees being fined by HMRC. And after 1st of September 2022, financial institutions may not be able to do business with that trust until it is registered. If you need any more details about the TRS, your advisor will be able to give you some more information. So before we start, let's go through a few hints and tips. The best tip I can give you is to get all of the information you need to be ready before you start. Whilst we would always recommend that you get all of the information needed, you can still complete the TRS if you don't have all the information to hand. You should also make sure that all the trustees have decided on which of them will be the lead trustee. And you'll also need a pen handy. If you have more than one trust to register, you'll need to follow this entire process for each trust. As you'll see in a minute, the first step is to create a Government Gateway Organisation ID, and you need to do that for each trust that is being registered. Once started, you have 28 days to complete the registration, so you can save and come back to it at any time. But after 28 days, all the information is deleted and you'll need to start over again. You may wish to watch this video all the way through before you start so you know what's coming, or you may wish to pause the video at each step. Either way, I'll be here walking you through the process. So, how do we go about completing the trust registration? Let's start off with step 1, which is to create a Government Gateway Organisation ID. You may already have a Government Gateway individual ID for your own tax returns, etc., but you need to have a separate organisation one for each trust which is to be registered. To set up a new Government ID, you can type in "Register a Trust" into Google and click on the top link. This takes you to a page looking like this. There's a lot of detail on this page about the TRS that you should read. Or you can scroll to the bottom of that page where it gets you to the Register Now section. If you have already started a TRS registration and need to either complete it or change it, you need to come back to this page to log back in. As I'm creating a new TRS entry, I need to create a new organisation gateway ID, so I'll click on the Create Sign-in Details. And I'll enter the email address I want to use here. As a reminder, this will be your email address as a lead trustee. For the purposes of this video, I am the lead trustee, and I'll click on Continue. This will then say that I've been sent a code to my email. An email will then be sent to the address you input. Once I've received the code to my email address, I will need to input it here and press Confirm. I can then continue on to the next page. I will then be asked to enter my full name. This just needs to be your first and last name. You don't need to add any middle names or titles. So you add your name and click on Continue. I now need to create a password. As it says here, this can be a mix of letters, numbers, or symbols. And the recommendation now is to use 3 random words. You will need this password to log back into the government gateway, so it should be memorized or kept somewhere safe. I now need to set up recovery details in case I forget the password. So click on Continue. You then need to set up a recovery word. You will then be given your government gateway organisation ID. This will also be emailed to you as well, and you'll need to keep this safe as it's the logon for the trust that is being registered. As I've said before, you will need to set up a new organisation ID for each trust that is being registered. You can use the same email address for each one, but you will be given a different ID each time. I now need to choose the type of account that I'm registering, and here I will click on organisation as this is for trusts. If you select the wrong one, it's important to note that you can't change it later, so it does need to be right at the start. You can then hit Continue. And I now need to set up additional security. So again, click Continue. I am then asked to decide how I want to get access codes. In my case, I prefer text message. So in this case, I will click on the top box and press Continue. I will then need to follow the instructions given. So I'm using a mobile phone. So here I can click Yes and Continue. I then need to insert my mobile number here. If you want to choose a different method, there is the option to do so as well. I will then have been sent a text message with a 6-digit code, access code, which I need to type in here. I've now got a recovery word and access code set up, so I can click on Continue to move on and start the registration process. As I'm registering a trust for the first time, I'm going to answer no to this question, as the trust has not already been registered. I'm now asked if the trust already has a unique taxpayer reference. The reference given when you register the trust that needs to pay tax, for example, when it reaches its 10-year anniversary or has a periodic charge to pay. In this particular case, I would answer no to this question as the trust I'm registering doesn't have a unique taxpayer reference. The next question asks whether I'm registering an express trust. In most cases, the answer to this question will be yes. I'm now asked about any tax liability. As I'm registering a trust purely for the TRS requirements, there is no tax liability, so I click no. Where tax does need to be paid, perhaps as part of a periodic charge, then the yes button should be clicked and follow the directions accordingly. But in my case, I will click no and carry on. And again here, I'm asked about tax liability. So if the trust needs to pay tax, then click on yes. But in the case of pure TRS registration, I will click no and save and continue. I am now about to enter details about the trust. But before I do, there's a page reminding us about the lead trustee's duty. It's important to read this so you know what HMRC expects you to do. I'm now going to continue to register the trust. This is the overview page that you'll be taken back to after completing each section. You can see here the progress against each section, and you can complete them in any order. Once you've started to fill in the TRS, you have 28 days to complete the registration, or as I mentioned earlier, that information will be deleted and you will need to start again. So let's start with the trust details. So click on the blue hyperlink here. The first box asks for the trust name. This is generally the name used on the trust deed. So the Smith Family Trust, for example. As you can see here, there are a maximum of 53 characters. So where the trust has a longer name, you can paraphrase it as appropriate. Where no trust name exists, you can use a suitable alternative, or perhaps where it was a will trust, it may not have a trust name. So you may wish to call it the John Smith Will Trust, for example. In my case, I'm going to use the example of the Blake Family Trust. I now need to input the date the trust was created. As it says here, this is the date on the trust deed was signed. And for will trusts, that will be usually the date of the date the deceased died. In my example, I'm using the date of the 1st of January 2000. The next question is about whether the trust has acquired land or property in the UK since the 6th of October 2020. Land or property refers to actual plots of land or bricks and mortar. If you have a trust holding just investments, then the answer here will be no. If your trust does hold land or property, then you would need to answer yes. I am now asked a series of questions about whether the trust or trustees need to or have registered in any countries within the EEA. These questions should be answered as appropriate for the trust. In most cases, where a trustee is resident in an EEA country, the trust should also be registered there too. In my case, I will be answering no. And this is because all of the trustees are resident and based in the UK, and therefore the trust doesn't need to and hasn't registered in any other EEA country. Having completed that, I now get a summary of my inputs. They can be changed by clicking on the blue change button if needed. Once you are happy, you can click on Save and Continue. As you can see, I have now completed the trust details segment, so I can move on to the next segment, which in my case is in relation to the settler's details. I then get some details about the information needed on the settler. The settler is the person who set the trust up and gifted the assets into it. This could be during their lifetime or under the terms of their will if they've since died. Once you're happy that you've got the information, we can click continue and start inputting the details of the settler. The first question is about whether the trust was set up after the settler died. If you answer yes to this question, you'll be asked some subsequent questions such as date of death. In my case, I'm using myself as the settler, which is me in this example. So I will be answering no, as I'm currently alive. I now need to confirm whether the settlor is an individual or a business. Similar information is needed about each, regardless of whether it's a business trust or personal trust. In my case, this is a personal trust, so I'll select individual. I now need to enter the settler's name, and as you can see here, first and last names are mandatory and middle names are optional. I now need to enter the settler's date of birth. If you don't know it, you can answer no and move to the next question. However, in my case, I know my date of birth, so I can enter it here. You then need to save and continue. I then need to enter the country of nationality. So where they were born or where their passport is registered. Again, if you don't know, there is the option to click no. But in my case, I know, so I will be hitting yes. I know that I was born in the UK, so here I have a UK nationality, so I would hit yes, and again, press save and continue. I'm now asked about the settler's country of residence, so where do I live? Again, if I don't know, there is the option to click no. But in my case, I know that I live in the UK, so I will hit yes and answer yes to being a UK resident. I'm now asked about the settler's mental capacity. Again, if I know the answer, I should select the relevant box, or where I don't know, I can click on don't know. In my case, I'm going to assume for the purposes of this webinar that I have mental capacity, so I'll click yes and save and continue. I can now check all of my inputs again against this page. And where any changes are needed, I have the option to change them here. Once you are happy with everything, again, you can hit save and continue. Where there is more than one settler, you have the option to add another settler here, either now or you could do that later. In my case, where there's only one settler on my trust, I know I've added all of the settlers, so I will tick no, I've added all of the settlers already, and I can then click save and continue. This then shows that the trust details and the settler details are now completed. So we can move on to complete the trustee section. So I'll click on the blue trustee hyperlink here. Again, I'll get some details about the information I need to provide on the following pages. I can see here again the reminder that all the trustees have the same legal responsibilities, although just one trustee, the lead trustee, is completing the TRS. The first question that I'm entering details for the lead trustee or any other trustee. I'd suggest that since the lead trustee is the person completing the online portal, it's easier to complete their details first. So I'll click on lead trustee. In most cases, the lead trustee will be an individual, but in some cases, for example, where professional trustees are involved or where there's business trust, the lead trustee may be a business, in which case you'd need to proceed through that option. But in my case, the lead trustee is an individual, again, assuming it's me, so I'll click on that. And again, you hit save and continue. I now need to enter the lead trustee's name. As you can see, the first and last name again are mandatory, with the middle names being optional. In my case, I'm the settlor and also the lead trustee, so I'll add my details here. Again, I then need to enter my date of birth and confirm whether I've got UK nationality. And here, as the lead trustee, a little bit more information is required, and I need to insert my national insurance details. If you don't have a national insurance number, you can click no, and instead it will ask you for your passport details. But in my case, I do have an NI number, so I'll click yes and save and continue. I then need to insert my national insurance number on this page. Remember that you only need these more in-depth details about the lead trustee because they're the person that are completing the online registration. So if it's yourself that's acting, you're going to know those details about yourselves. You don't need to provide NI details about anyone else on the trust. HMRC will automatically check the national insurance number given against the name input. So you need to make sure it's the correct NI number. I then need to provide some details about where the lead trustee lives. So in my case, I live in the UK, and then I'm asked to input details with regards to my address. And once I've completed that, again, I can hit save and continue. I then need to, again, insert details regarding the email address of the lead trustee. And again, as you'll be the one that's completing it, you would know your email. And you enter your email address here and then hit save and continue. You then also need to provide a contact number for the lead trustee. So you input that here. And again, you can then hit save and continue. Once again, I then get a summary of my inputs. And as you can see, the name, date of birth, national insurance number have automatically been verified by HMRC. Again, if I need to change any details, I can do so by clicking on the change buttons on this page. Once I'm happy, I can click save and continue, and that will be the information for the lead trustee done. I now need to enter the details of any other trustees, and I can either do that now or later, or if there are no more, I can select that option. Usually, however, and it's good practice to have at least 2 trustees acting. So in my case, I'm going to add another trustee. So I'll click yes, I want to add them now, and save and continue. And I'll be faced with similar questions again. And for me, the next trustee is also an individual. So I'll hit individual, save and continue. And again, I'll be asked to provide their name. And here I'm going to use Boris Smith. I'll insert the name here and hit save and continue. And once again, I'll be asked about the trustee's date of birth. And I'd be asked to enter details of the date of birth here. And also details of the nationality. And for example, if we don't know the nationality, you can hit no. However, best efforts should be made in all cases to provide as much information as possible. But where some details are not known, then the lead trustee can enter either no, or even in some sections don't know and move on. When missing information is found out on the then you can go in and update the TRS accordingly. So here I'm going to assume that I don't know what Boris Smith's country of nationality is. So I'll answer no. But I do know that he lives in the UK, so I can answer yes to where he lives. and confirm that he's UK resident. Again, the final question is around mental capacity. And in my case, we're assuming that he does have full mental capacity. So I click yes, and then I can hit save and continue. Again, I have the opportunity to check all of my inputs and the option to change anything that may be incorrect. And once I'm happy with all of the information on this page, I can then hit save and continue. If I need to add more trustees, again, I have the option to do that here, either now or later. But in my case, it's the two of us that are acting, so I'll click on no and continue. I can now see that the trustee information section is now fully completed. We can then move on to the beneficiary section. There's lots of information on this first page about the details you need to provide about the beneficiaries, whether they're named or classes. Again, you should make sure you have all of this information to hand before completing the registration process. As I do, I'll click on continue. So now I need to select what kind of beneficiary I'm adding. For absolute trusts, which is where the beneficiary is named, I would select individual. For discretionary trusts, we can use classes of beneficiaries, as well as if there's a named default beneficiary. In those cases where there's classes, I would need to list the different classes and also provide details of the default beneficiary. As you can see, there's a maximum of 25 different beneficiary types, which should be enough to cover in most cases. The current guidance from HMRC is that if an individual can easily be identified, then they should be added. This is more relevant for will trusts, where the will may state that the asset is in trust for the benefit of all my children. HMRC take the view that the executors should reasonably know who all those children are, and as such, they should all be listed as individuals. In a normal discretionary trust where we have multiple classes, it's harder to identify each individual, and as such, I can just stick with classes, unless, of course, there is a particular named default beneficiary, in which case I can input details of that person. So let's start by entering details of a default beneficiary who is an individual. I firstly need to add their name, and again, the middle names are optional. I am then asked whether I know their date of birth. And as I know that, again, if I know that, I can enter that, but if I don't, then I can select no. In my case, I'm hitting yes, and then I'll be asked for the date of birth to be entered here. You save and continue here, and then I'm asked about the individual beneficiary's nationality. Again, if you don't know their nationality, you basically can hit no here. And also, you will also be asked about their country of residence. Again, if you're not sure, you can choose no here, but it is important to try and obtain as much information as possible. And again, the final question is around whether or not the beneficiary has got mental capacity. In this case, I'm going to assume that he doesn't, so I click no. And once again, you're provided with your usual summary of inputs, and you have a chance to change anything that may be wrong. Once you're happy with the details input here, you can save and continue. I can now add a class of beneficiary if I was dealing with a trust that was discretionary, where we're assuming in my example that Jonathan Blake was named as an individual default beneficiary, but also we've got some classes of beneficiary, so I can add them now. I can now decide to add the classes of beneficiaries where I'm dealing with a trust where Jonathan was named as, say, the default beneficiary. So I've already put his details in as an individual. But then as the trust is discretionary, there will also be a class of beneficiaries. You then need to provide a description for the class of beneficiary. And you'll note here that you've got a 56-character limit. So you may need to paraphrase accordingly to ensure that you can give a description of the class that you're entering. So in this example, I'll use something that's already on my trust, which says any child or remote issue of the settlor. And it is possible to shorten this if needed. And we'll need to do this for each class of beneficiaries. As before, I can continue to add more beneficiaries either now or later. Where there are multiple classes of beneficiary, you'll need to add them all in as we've just done. In my case, I'm going to assume that I've added all of my classes of beneficiary. Once again, that will then provide me with my overview page, and I can see that I've now completed the mandatory sections. As you can see at the top again, do remember, as I've mentioned before, you've got 28 days to complete the trust registration process. And what you'd need to do is you'd need to just log back in through the Register a Trust page using your Government Gateway ID and password, and it will take you to this page. There are a few more sections to complete, but for most cases, there will not be a lot to do. So let's start with the first one, and that is company owners or controlling interest. For most of my trusts, the answer to this question will be no. And then you'll see that that section will be completed. If you did have a trust with a controlling interest in a non-EEA company, then there would be further details to add before that section will be completed. Now we can move on to the section entitled Protectors. A protector is someone who is not a trustee or a beneficiary, but usually has the power to oversee some of the administration of the trust by the trustees. And this is more common in offshore trust. In my case, I do not have a protector, so I will be answering no to this question. And again, what you'll see is that the protector section is now complete. I will then now move on to the last section, which is entitled Other Individuals. This last category is a bit of a catch-all for anyone who's not a trustee, settlor or beneficiary, but can influence the way the trust is managed. HMRC give us an example of a parent of a minor beneficiary where that parent isn't a trustee already. A good example of this is, say, if my parents set up a trust for my son, but for whatever reason did not want me to be a trustee. Whilst I don't have a formal role within the trust, as the beneficiary is my son, I could probably influence the trustees in some way in terms of how they should maybe make payments. So my details can be added here. If you do have another person to add, you'll need to provide the same information as for the other parties. So again, the name, date of birth, nationality, and residence information. But in my case, we're going to assume that I don't have anyone else to be added, so I will select no. As you can see, this now takes you back to the overview page, and you can see that all the sections are now complete. You can, if you want to, print a copy of the inputs here, or you can do that after you have completed the declaration. You will then be given your unique reference number. This number is really important as it essentially is the TRS reference number that you'll need to use when you want to make changes with regards to this trust. You will also be able to print or save a PDF copy of that trust information. Again, you should do this and keep a copy, as you may need to refer to this in the future. The final step then is to complete the declaration. So if you click here, then that takes you to the declaration page. And in here, I need to add in my name as the person who's completed the TRS. And below, you will see that there is a declaration to read. And once I'm happy with that, I can click on confirm and send. I then get taken to this page. There are a few things to note on this page. Firstly, you'll note that we can print or save a declared copy of the trust registration by clicking here. Then, as you can see, this is a copy of all your inputs. I would strongly recommend that you print or save a copy to keep with your records and give a copy to your advisor. And you'll see in a minute, we need to know some of these details to get back into the TRS again. The second important thing to note is that this reference here is not the unique reference number. It's only a reference number for the declaration and is not what your advisor or any other financial institution will need. As you can see, we're told we can get the URN by signing out of the service and signing back in again. We can also sign back in to update the TRS where trustees or beneficiaries, for example, have changed, or if the trust has to pay tax or is to be closed. So let's look at logging back into the TRS again to find the URN. So we'll click on sign out at the top right-hand corner of this page. To log back into the TRS, we need to go back through the government gateway, and I always do this by searching for Register a Trust on Google, just like we did at the start of this process. And that takes you to this page. You then need to scroll down and click on How to Register. And once again, we'll scroll down to the green Register Now box. And we can then input our Government Gateway ID and password that we used originally and click on Sign In. We then get taken to this page, which tells us the URN at the top. This is the number that you need to keep safe with other trust documents and also to give to your advisor. It's the number that any financial institutions who may deal with your trust will also need. You may also need to print or save another copy of the trust registration. So let's look at how we do that. To start, let's click on Continue. And the first question we get to is whether there's an agent managing the registration. If you're doing this yourself, then the answer will be no. And you then click on Continue. Here, we get told that we'll need to answer some questions about the trust to verify that we are the right person to be logging back in. So it's important that you know what was the latest version, which is why saving a copy of the declaration is useful. So let's carry on by clicking on Continue. The first question is to input the lead trustee's name. So this will be the person that was added as the lead trustee at the start of the registration. This can, of course, be changed later on, as you'll see. But in my case, I'm the lead trustee, so I'll input my name here and then click on Continue. I now need to input the date of birth of the lead trustee. Remember that if the lead trustee is someone other than yourself, then you'll need to make sure you've got those details to hand. Once you've input that information, again, you need to click on Continue. We're then asked to input the national insurance number of the lead trustee. And once you've done that, again, you need to click on Continue. And then again here, we get a summary of our inputs and we're asked to make sure that we're happy with them. If they do not match the information the TRS already holds, we won't be able to access the TRS. In my case, I'm happy with the information, so I'll hit submit. This then shows that I've successfully answered the security questions, so now can view and change the TRS details. So let's take a look by clicking on continue. There's a note here to say that if we do make changes, we need to complete the declaration again or they won't be saved. So let's click on the green button at the bottom. The first choice we are given is to view the trust's last declaration. This is how we can print or save another copy of that confirmation. So let's click on yes and move on. So you can see here that we get the chance to print or save another copy of the declared copy of the trust registration. This version does have the URN on it, unlike the first version we got, which only had the declaration reference. But let's have a look at what else we can do here. So click on Continue Maintaining this Trust. And what we get now is a menu of choices. As you can see, the first option is where you can change details of all the parties to the trust. So this might be if a trustee or beneficiary is added or removed, or changes their name or residence, for example. The second option is to be used when the trust has been closed down and all the assets paid out to the beneficiaries. The third option is for if the trust needs to pay tax. In general, this could be, for example, at the periodic charge date, or otherwise known as the 10-year anniversary. And the final option is to get a digitally signed copy of the trust registration confirmation. Let's click on that so you can see what it looks like compared to the declaration of registration that we've seen before. And then press continue. As we can see here, there is a reminder that if you do need to make changes to the record, you should do that before you view the PDF. And again, if you do make changes, you can't view the PDF until you've completed the declaration, logged out of the TRS and logged back in again. So let's answer this question of, do you want to review evidence of the trust registration with yes? And then press continue. Here, you get a download of the PDF confirmation, and as you can see, it's in a letter format and provides details of the latest version of what has been saved on the register. Again, I'd suggest that you save or print a copy of this and keep it with your other trust documents. You are then automatically signed out of the TRS and taken to a page to give feedback. It's taken us a while to go through it, and I've talked about each step, but for most trusts, it will probably only take 5 or 10 minutes to complete the registration process, provided, of course, that you've got all of the information regarding the settler trustee beneficiaries to hand. So I'd suggest using a client checklist that ensures that all of that information is there, or fill any gaps in before you start that registration process. And as you've seen, aside from the lead trustee and settler, the details for the other parties, you do have some don't know options if you haven't got that information to hand, or if it's hard to obtain that information. Hopefully, you now have a better understanding of how to complete the online trust registration service. If you need any more help, it's advisable for you to contact your own advisor. Thank you very much for listening.